Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nura Ashfirani binti Johani S51816 and I will present the abstract. Foreign direct investment FDI can expand a country's economy when the domestic savings of the country are decreasing. In developing countries, FDI is one of the most important resources in forming the country's capital. Regional economic growth, volatility, and trade openness are uncertain. The uncertainty can cause shock to the inflow of FDI, whether in positive or negative shocks. This study aims to investigate whether the inflow of FDI can be affected by the regional economic growth, volatility, and trade openness. This research used time series data during the period between 1975 and 2019. Asymmetric causality test is used to test co-integration. The test also aims to recognize if there is any asymmetrical relationship between the variables. Bidirectional causality happened in Bangladesh between positive shocks in regional economic growth and inflows of FDI. In India and Sri Lanka, bidirectional causality happened between the negative shocks in regional economic growth, volatility, and inflows of FDI. Unidirectional causality happened between positive shocks in regional economic growth and trade openness on FDI inflows in Sri Lanka. In India, unidirectional causality happened between positive shocks in regional economic growth and inflows of FDI, as well as between positive shocks in trade openness and inflows of FDI. Unidirectional causality also happened in Bangladesh between negative shocks in regional economic growth and inflows of FDI, as well as between positive shocks in regional trade openness and inflows of FDI. In Pakistan, unidirectional causality happened between FDI inflows and negative shocks in regional economic growth, as well as between positive shocks in regional economic growth and FDI inflows. The authors conclude that factors that can encourage foreign investors to invest in the country are specific macroeconomics fundamental and the activities in the country. Last but not least, foreign investors in capital are increasing. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Shahira binti Awang, metric number S51820. Today, I want to talk about the specification of our group assignment, which is related to the international trade. Type of data that was used is data import, data export, trade openness, foreign direct investment, economic volatility, table, and also figure. The data was retrieved from World Development Indicator WDI World Bank on June 2021. The format data that have used is raw, semi-analyzed, and analyzed. The experimental factor is data filtering and rolling asymmetry directional causality test. The experimental feature is export and import data was extracted from WDI database. The complete trade openness data were derived by the merging of the sum of import and export data and the inflow of FDI divided with GDP of each country. The data was then analyzed to produce trade openness volatility. For the research article, I found a lot of research about our assignment project, but I will list a few here. First, research from Doku Akuma and Afrayi 2017, which is Journal on Effect of Chinese Foreign Direct Investment on Economic Growth in Africa using annual time series data of 20 African countries from year 2003 to 2012. Studies use panel least square regression and Granger causality test. The result find that increase in China FDI stock in Africa significantly increased the Africa GDP growth. Second, from Tan Chan and Stringes 2019, which is Journal on Impact of Foreign Direct Investment, Trade Openness and Economic Institution on Growth in Emerging Countries in case of Vietnam. He has using dynamic panel data in the period of 2005 to 2015. The result revealed the empirical result of dynamic regression generalized method of moment GMM, and findings show the combined effect of inward FDI with trade openness has a substitute effect on the economic growth. Next, studies from Saki and Iggy 2017, which is Journal on Effect of Trade and FDI on Economic Growth in Africa. Studies using a sample of 45 African countries over the period 1990 to 2014. Generalized method of moment estimation technique which adequate cope with potential endogeneity issue. The findings show they are positive connected with inward FDI and traits such as poverty reduction, job opportunities, technological transfer, competitiveness, and economic growth. Next, from IMC Roche 2016, which is Journal on the Foreign Direct Investment to the Economic Growth using sample of 124 cross-country data for the period from 1971 to 2010. The result used ordinary least square of pool two-stage least square, three-stage least square, and generalized method of moment test. Findings show the overall effect of FDI are positively associated with growth and vice versa, whereas labor force, trade openness, and economic freedom are determinant of FDI, which can stimulate income to grow further. Lastly, from Saki and Iggy 2017, in their studies of Journal on Trade Openness and Economic Growth in Bayesian Model Averaging Estimate of Cross-Country Growth Regression using a sample of period 1960 to 2000. The findings show no evidence that trade openness is directly correlated with the economic growth in the long run. International trade may benefit into economic growth by enhancing knowledge diffusion, technological transfer, and competitiveness.
Hi, my name is Erni Kartika Anastasia binti Hosni, matrix number S51841. I will presenting the value of the data for our research. Table 1 presents the result of the following commonly used unit root tests: ADF, PP test, Phillips and perseverance, when the null hypothesis of the variable has a unit root, as well as the KPSS test, which is Kwiatkowski, when the null hypothesis of the variable has no unit root, including the assumptions of constant and trends. The result of the study have unveiled a mixed integration order, which implied that the variable was stationary at one level and or after the first difference. Next, Table 2 presents the result of the nonlinear unit root test following the procedure introduced by Table 1. The tests were conducted with a constant and trends. The test result of FDI inflow and regional GDP volatility in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan confirm the presence of a nonlinear unit root by rejecting the null hypothesis of the linear unit root test at a level of 1% and a significant with the constant and trend at a level of 5%. Furthermore, trade openness presented a nonlinear unit root test with 5% significant with a constant. Table 3 displays the result of the cross unit root test. Taking into account the test statistic, the null hypothesis of the linear unit root test was rejected by FDI inflow in Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka at having 1% significant. Furthermore, trade openness and GDP volatility also rejected the null hypothesis at having 10% significant. This finding implied that the following research variable: regional economic growth, volatility, trade openness, and FDI inflow in Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka follow a non-linear stationary process. Table 4 reports the NOLS estimate for the nonlinear model that follow a polynomial function of degree 4, which was found to be the most appropriate model given the information criteria. The null hypothesis of the linear relationship was rejected at 1% significance, which implied that the relationship between regional economic growth volatility, trade openness, and inflow of FDI in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka is a nonlinear. We then choose to use the nonlinear BDS approach proposed by Brooke in order to detect the variance residual. The null hypothesis in the BDS test with independent and identical distribution was rejected, which means that the time series has had nonlinear characteristics under different dimensions. As shown in Table 5, the BDS test result indicate that the null hypothesis of linear dependence was rejected at a level of 1%, demonstrating that the nonlinear model was more suitable for detecting short-term relationship between regional economic growth, trade, openness, financial development, capital formation, and inflow of FDI in certain South Asian countries.
Hi, my name is Nur Azila binti Muhammad Azhari, metric number S50322. So I will continue my part, the data in this study. This study is to examine the openness and volatility in FDI. To finish this study, the researcher needs to collect the time series data since 1975 to 2019. There are three variables used in this study, and the dependent variable is foreign direct investment, FDI, measured by inflow of FDI. The independent variables are regional economic growth volatility, and it will be measured by standard deviation of economic growth. Then, regional trade openness is the sum of import and export. These data of three variables are involving the selected South Asian countries, which are Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. This data can be accessed through World Bank according to the countries involved. The aim of this empirical study to investigate the asymmetrical between regional economic volatility, trade openness, and inflow of FDI in South Asian countries involved. Based on the collected data, we will find out whether the volatility and trade openness will affect the inflow of FDI, whether it increase or decrease.
Hi, my name is Narashima binti Mansur, number metric S51800. I will present method in research. Journal was a use time series data to explore new insight covering 44 years of the observation of the period between 1175 until 2019. Each day is measured by the standard deviation of the economy growth regional trend openness, which is measured by the sum of the import and export in the South Asia economy and inflow of the FDI, which is measured by FDI as a percentage of the GDP of respective country, which include Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Asymmetric causality test. In general, use the asymmetric causality test for the investigation relationship between variables used at the empirical test required two additional sets of data that represent the breakdown of the variable into the cumulative positive and negative chain. Step 4 Asymmetric causality test. Step 1 Standard unit growth test. Step 2 Triangle costing in mean test. Step 3 Asymmetric Triangle causality test. Asymmetric Triangle causality test.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nik Marita binti Ni Abdul Malik. The metric number S51798. Next, I will discuss about the analysis and discussion, the result of the asymmetric causality test. In table 4, include the positive and negative shock of the following independent variable, such as regional economic growth volatility and trade openness. A number of causal relationships have been revealed using the asymmetric test. However, we focus on explaining the effect of positive and negative shock on inflow of FDI in certain South Asian countries. Now I can explain in Bangladesh. We observe a prevailing bidirectional causality between positive shock in regional economic growth and inflow of FDI. Furthermore, an indirectional causality also appears when explaining the causal effect between negative shock in regional economic growth and inflow of FDI, as well as positive shock in regional trade openness and inflow of FDI. The finding of the study suggests that, in addition to Bangladesh attribute of FDI, Bangladesh are also guided by regional economic behavior. Next, with regard to India. The finding of the study disclosed bidirectional causality between negative shock in regional economic growth and inflow of FDI. In addition, an indirectional causal effect occurred between positive shock in regional economic growth and inflow of FDI, as well as positive shock in trade openness and inflow of FDI. In Pakistan, the finding of the disclosed and indirectional causality between inflow of FDI and negative shock in regional economic growth, as well as positive shock in regional economic growth and inflow of FDI. Lastly, I will discuss about the result of asymmetric causality test in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, it is evident in the causal test result that there is bidirectional causality between negative shock in regional economic growth volatility and inflow of FDI. Furthermore, an indirectional causality has been exposed in terms of positive shock in regional economic growth and trade openness on inflow of FDI. That's all from me.
Hello, hi. My name is Mama Azmi Hafid bin Mama Asni. Today I will talk about the conclusion. As we can clearly see how the importance of the foreign direct investment playing role in the openness trade. Basically, these studies want to find the new insight of regarding to the new role of the regional macroeconomic fundamentals in interacting foreign investment, foreign direct investment in the South Asia countries such as Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. Also Sri Lanka. This study show that the finding of the study show that the country with specific macroeconomic fundamentals and the activities inside the countries playing an important role in the term of the encouraging the foreign investor and the investment in capital increasing between foreign participants. This is basically the study show an empirical evidence and set of data in 1975 until 2019. So basically we use the linear and non-linear test, and this show that there are 5 things that being keep related in this openness trade. It's basically macroeconomic fundamental, foreign investor, capital, also openness trade. It's basically when you have more of the foreign investor into your countries, basically you can having more of your bring up your capital into the world organization. So that's it. Thank you.